are going to get started here. My name is Jordan Brown, and we are going to be looking at open source today. When we look at this map, every dot represents 50,000 people who have never heard the gospel. Every 2 seconds, 3 people somewhere in the world die with one of these in their pocket. Someone knows Jesus of those 3. Someone's heard about Jesus and is not following him. And someone dies and they've never even heard his name. Or maybe they have, but they don't know anything about our Lord. The majority of the 3.5 billion people that are unreached with the gospel live in this box. I know we've seen this a lot, but I want to orient our thinking around the problem and the opportunity. And so how are we going to see this impacted? How are we going to see the gospel actually infiltrate all of the nooks and crannies where the gospel currently isn't, where people are living in darkness? How are we going to see a change in the climate of Christianity, where in the institutional West, Christianity has been in decline for decades? How do we see a shift in those times? Technology has totally changed our world. Over the last 2 decades, 3 decades, we have seen more change, as we know, than any other time in history. How do we reach the next generations? Gen Z, Gen Alpha, I have a 7 and a 5-year-old at home. They learn differently, they think differently, they approach life differently because of digital technology. And the problem space to engage the Gen Zs of the global south and the unreached places of the world, we have to engage ourselves differently. At Lassonde, this is why Michael O said the best tools to unite us in disciple making and disciple maturing are digital. It would be to our great detriment and grave danger to ignore digital. And this was the call for the next 10 to 15 years for the global church. I was speaking with a church planner in South Asia, and they said this. They said, technology has captured my people. Now we must capture technology and use it to capture them back to Jesus. And so we all know this, that technology is ripe for opportunity. But if we don't start thinking differently, I believe, about technology, we're going to continue to give the digital world away to darkness. My kids are going to grow up in a world that is so dark that bombards their thoughts and their thinking with things that are not of the Lord. And so I think part of that thinking differently has to be open source. Open source is where you create something that you allow for others to use freely, distribute freely, modify freely, and own freely. And a lot of people not in circles like this, most people in the room have heard open source. It's not going to be anything new. But the majority of our world and the digital technology we know and love and use every day runs on open source technology. 70 to 90% of that modern world. We see millions of developers every single day contributing to open source projects. 90% of companies use open source somewhere in their operations. 90% of Fortune 100 companies use GitHub. And so we see open source all around us. Men and women coming together to use, share, build, and fund into one central place, promoting together, bringing their best ideas, and contributing the creative genius of a whole in one place. Yet when we look at Christian technology, we see a huge, stark contrast. Less than 5% of Christian technology is built open source today. And this was true of the technological world about 30 years ago. And as we look around at the Christian climate in technology, we're about 20 to 25 years behind modern technology in our utilization and adoption. And I think one of the reasons is because we're not embracing open source. We see actually in the secular world more partnership around technology than many of the Christian organizations of today. Every single major organization in the secular world has open source program offices where they come together to say, how do we use, how do we build, how do we promote mutually each other, and then bring our flair on top of really powerful core systems. It saddens me, but I think that they are actually partnering better than we are in the church. Money is driving them to do things that I believe we're called to do. Imagine, though, if organizations like Apple and Google, right, they've benefited from open source. But imagine, think about your favorite ministries. Imagine if each one of those had an open source program office embedded in the center of it, mutually benefiting the gospel around them and pulling from a network of trusted men and women building, using, sharing the same technology together. And I think why open source is so successful is because it's not a man-made structure. This was a call to God, to his early church. When we see the early church selling everything they have, coming together, and bringing that into one place, and that resulted in many people being added to their number daily, those who are being saved. We see the call to, we see the call to not take what we're creating. We're lights of the world. Not to take what we're creating and put it under a bowl. Closed source systems, they have a place, but that's partly putting what we're creating, the light of what we're creating, under a bowl. And if that's all that we have, if we don't have a powerful light structure supporting the closed source ecosystem that we need, we're missing opportunity. We're reinventing the wheel. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. If you have all these different closed source solutions, there's not a way for the iron that are in both of those to sharpen one another. Let's bring the creative genius of the Holy Spirit inside of men and women into one place to build technology together. And lastly, I think that we see one of the greatest open source initiatives was God creating man in his image. He gave his image freely and fully to man, knowing that there would be people that took advantage of that image, knowing that there would be misuse of that image. God still led the way in doing that. So we see a biblical premise for this. And there are a lot of benefits to open source. You have a community of people that are working together for a common good. They're not there because of a paycheck. They're not there for their own benefit. They do receive benefit, but they're working together for a common vision, a common mission. There's accessibility and inclusion. I've sat in rooms in very remote places in South Asia, looking at the men and women who have a smartphone in their hand, and they have no application on that smartphone other than maybe a Bible app to help them follow God and live out the calling in his life. Totally unaccessible, but they're completely accessible through this, but their access to the powerful technology we know is not there. Innovation. How many of us have had an idea that has been accelerated by someone else just by us sharing it with them? You don't have to show your hand, right? That's the power of open source. If I have an idea, someone can accelerate that idea. Someone can enhance that idea if they know about it, if they have the opportunity to share openly their feedback. So innovation and customization is huge because these platforms are built for people to be able to bring into their own world and use how they need to, customize it down to their unique faith expression. So there's a lot of benefits to open source. And I believe that Christians will not succeed in gaining control over digital technology without embracing open source. The secular world would agree with this statement. They're living this out, and they're seeing dominance in the digital technology space. I believe that we will lose the next generations one swipe and click at a time if we don't focus in here on the opportunity. Here's just a couple of quotes that I want to share of some organizations. There's many that are starting to say, you know what, let's think differently. James Kelly of Faith Tech says, Faith Tech has been processing through launching our own Faith Tech Open initiative, focused solely on open source projects. We are actively looking for ways to collaborate. Mark Vergo of One Hope says, One Hope is running a digital evolution project, and open source is a foundational element to where the Lord is leading us. We have already open sourced an AI architecture for chatbots, and this is just the beginning of working together as a community. Nick Wu of Indigenous said, open source technology mirrors the spirit of the early church. where believers shared everything they had and no one claimed ownership over the ministry or the gospel. The rise of AI and tech presents an opportunity for Christians to embrace this principle, ensuring that the tools and platforms we create serve the entire church rather than just a select few. To do otherwise would run counter to the example set by Christ's disciples. And so organizations and groups are coming in and they're saying, let's think differently together. Gospel Ambition is an organization that I've gotten to be a part of. And I learned what I know about open source from this organization. It's the largest open source ecosystem focused on disciple making in the world. Many people maybe haven't even heard of Gospel Ambition or even the tools because they're being used mostly in unreached areas around the world. They're not being, that's where they were intentionally designed, because designing tools that are able to reach the hardest areas, they can be brought into easier to reach areas, but tools that are designed to reach the reached areas oftentimes can't translate into those harder areas. And so I just want to briefly share their history. In the early 2000s, there was a team of missionaries that moved to a really unreached country of North Africa, and they saw everyone here on their device. They said, how are we going to impact them? How are we going to reach them there? So they started to figure out how are we going to share ads online? They didn't know any of these things. They just started to teach themselves. How do we engage and interrupt people online in their device with Jesus? How do we meet them there? And through that process, they started to develop some practices, some principles. And other organizations, other ministry teams, they were sitting there and they were like, what is going on? What are you guys doing? You're thinking differently. And as they engaged with them, instead of keeping that knowledge, keeping those resources that they were creating to themselves, they said, let's freely give that to you. How can we actually build them in a way that allows us to package it, to pass it on to you as easily and seamlessly as we can? And over the years, they built their own platform, released that open source disciple tools, and then they started to build different powerful platforms on top of that. And from there, other organizations started to say, we don't want to just use the tools, use the strategies. We want to start building alongside of those. East West was a ministry that said, we want to think differently alongside of you. Instead of building our own solutions, we want to contribute, build needs that we have, and contribute it back to the whole. And so now there's a really thriving ecosystem. There's a new platform. Similarly, so Disciple Tools was kind of the core platform. And now there's a new platform, Faith Copilot, that is being built. And today, it's actually the official release of the platform open source. It's designed to just say, hey, how can we help ministries think differently about AI, even with the name? Most ministries are scared to even touch AI. It's starting to become more mainstream, but the platform's here, and we're hoping that it can at least start the conversation and people can come together to use, share, build, and fund together. If you go to faithcopilot.com, you'll be able to see and get all the information there, the open source repo and everything needed. Even be able to demo just a simple chat widget that you could embed on your site. The platform allows for multi-comparison chat and semantic search, has different customizable light apps. So we have ministries using kind of a ChatGPT replacement that they can embed their own WhatsApp numbers or things to allow for that digital responder to send a chatbot to someone that they're messaging online, and then for them to be able to connect with a real person. There's just more customizations. Any ministry can take any of the light apps and contribute their own, so other ministries can take and pull those down, or they can just customize from there. Lastly, there's customizable workflows and shareable profiles. So if someone figures out, hey, to engage with moms in this context, with this profile, this workflow is really working well for moms in Africa. Well, someone could take that entire profile and just copy it and send it over to their friends, and they could easily start to then deploy that in their own context. So here's just some of the platform features, and it's an open source license, so you all are free to engage with it and use it however the Lord calls you to. And it's free. We're making it openly accessible. So that's Faith Copilot. And then the ecosystem, we would love for people to join us, right? People to help use, help share, help build, help fund. Not fund necessarily monetarily, but you might have insight and wisdom. So let's learn together. Let's participate together. There's a lot of need, and we would love to just provide that. We're about to have invite up a friend of mine who was instrumental in the creation of Disciple Tools and that open source ecosystem. But before we do, I just want to share just a visual very quickly. Disciple Tools, powerful platform with unique features built on top, made available. Faith Copilot is another platform coming into the open source space. Throughout the process, there were other open source platforms. As they heard about Disciple Tools, or as they participated in work with Disciple Tools, they released their own platforms. And integration is starting to be had between those platforms or strategies. But we know that there's other open source projects that could be open source. Maybe there's currently a closed source project that says, you know what, we want to make this available and we want to actually bring in contributors. And so maybe a new project comes online, or an existing project gets opened up. How do we see those happen and start to be connected to existing projects like Disciple Tools, like Faith Copilot? How do we see common protocols? How do we see things built that don't have to be reinvented? And eventually, what if we saw an entire network around the world of people using together, sharing together, building together, funding together? I think we would see such an acceleration that we would scare ourselves at what we were accomplishing for the name of Jesus all around the world. We're calling, what would a global community of disciples that openly use, promote, build, and fund digital tools and resources in pursuit of completing the Great Commission in this generation? Imagine. I think we have the tools and the opportunity to maybe complete the Great Commission in our lifetime. But we have to work together. We're calling it Openly Faithful, and we're purely calling it that because how can we openly be faithful to the Lord? And we would love for people to join in different of the projects that you heard, join us on Discord, and we'll see where the Lord can take us. Here's some of the websites. If you want to visit those, you can find the Discord there. Christine Abernathy is speaking right after this, and she's going to be sharing a lot of the practical how-tos. This was more of a high-level vision of us engaging in open source technology, but Christine will be helping us really see the practical. What would that look like for us? So I want to invite up Chris Chasm here, and I'm going to ask him some questions. We're just going to have an interview. Chris is someone that I've learned everything that I know about open source from, and just the vision of how can we engage together. It's been a really beautiful journey. I still remember. It's a memory that I'll never forget. The day that I visited Disciple Tools website. And if you visit it, it's not the flashiest thing in the world. It's not going to just make you ooh and ah. But as I read through what was behind this platform, as I started to dig into the platform and see how beautifully it was created, and that it was created by a group of people that weren't all a part of one organization or one group, my mind was blown. And I was like, this is what I want to be a part of this. And Chris was the first person that I talked to after that, and it was off to the races from there. So I'm going to ask Chris some questions. So Chris, tell us the story of how and why you decided to launch Disciple Tools open source.
Is this on? There we go. If I just swallow it like this. Real quick, can I do a quick show of hands just so I know who's in the room? How many developers are in the room? Wow, awesome. And how many have done open source? Wow, awesome. Okay. All right, that'll shape the answer. Okay, so I ran into one of my life's opportunities. Like God gave me one of the greatest opportunities to run into evangelists who were being epically bold in an Islamic police state. And they were trying to reach Muslims who were seeking, at the risk of their own life, anything about Jesus. And they were putting together campaigns to basically try to find them as they were seeking online. This is back when online evangelism was kind of infant so it was a little wild and risky to do it. But we didn't want to just leave them online and leave them with knowledge. We wanted to invite them to come offline, meet us face to face, and we wanted to show them the way of Jesus, baptize them, teach them how to plant churches that then planted more churches. So this was the ambition. So we were using everything digital to get offline, but the problems we had were the CRMs at the time were super expensive. So if you're going to try to have a movement of 100 or 1,000 people who are getting coordinated across the country, you had a cost per seat problem. And when you're working nonprofit, and you're especially working internationally, you're not sitting on thousands of dollars per month to pay for those licenses. In addition to that, we ran into some massive blocks. We were running into big problems in the Middle East, North Africa, where we were using things like Salesforce to try to coordinate incoming contacts. So when someone would come funneling through a radio station or a satellite television, the collaboration of multiple ministries, nobody could kind of get their job done. It was kind of like the software always served like 80%, never 100% of anybody's desire. So we found ourselves in this position. We needed to do something where we could all work in parallel, because if it was always waiting on one group to provide the software as service perfectly for everybody, that wasn't going to happen. We needed to do it in a way that was financially unconstrained. No proprietary code bases, no restrictions. It could be hosted anywhere for very low cost. I mean, these are some of the things we were facing early on. How do we get this thing to multiply as fast as possible? And we can give it away and let other ministries, if we can't get this feature into this software, raise $5,000 and get your own developer and put your own feature in the software. Like, we needed something that could be just wildly available to the kingdom. And so that's what we went after. And this idea was, and so because you're developers, and some of you guys have done open source, some of the interesting things we faced early on was we were in an Islamic police state, for one, so there's a huge amount of fear about, you kidding me, you're going to open this thing up and make it a public repo on GitHub. They can read the code. Like, these people are literally looking for you. That was one thing we had to push upstream on. Another was actually an ego journey, because if you are someone who's written code, it's kind of like showing everybody your work. You know, it's like going to the pool, not being ready for the pool, pulling the shirt off. It's like everybody gets to read what you wrote and how well you wrote it. So there's a big ego journey that we had to take. There was even a step I remember early on where, just out of old habit, we were signing our name to the top of scripts and the top of sections we were, right? You're just leaving your little signature inside the code. We just deliberately started removing that, taking out our fingerprints. So you can't roll through the code and see what I contributed or what someone else contributed. There was like a deliberate agenda to remove that kind of ego out of the effort. And we have been super surprised at how the Lord has decided to, with no advertising budget at all, literally he's taken people and dropping incredible guys like Jordan on the website, and now we're seeing this all around the world be heavily used by hard frontline workers who need this exact kind of software. And it's just one of the ones we've done.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are some, you mentioned a little bit of this, so I might jump from this one, but a word that I've learned is God's heavenly economy, or a phrase, and they use this a lot at Gospel Ambition. And so could you explain what that is and how you've seen that play out in open source?
Yeah, so we were given this by a great mentor. We were blessed with a number of spiritual mentors, but he taught us about the heavenly economy. And it's like this. In a zero-sum world, if I have a buck and you don't have a buck, and I give you my buck, I now have less buck, and you have more buck, right? This is a zero-sum world. If I give away, I lose. I end up with less. But that's not actually how God designed it. And we know this because love is a great example of a non-zero-sum element, right? The more love I give away, the actual more love I have. The less love I give away, the less love I have, right? And this is the economy of this. God is love, right? So he designed a kingdom economy. So we played this same principle out inside software. We did it in the sense of that the more I give away my power, the more I give away my resources, even though I need resources, but the more I give it away freely, I trust my Father to provide more for me to give away next time. And this has been the absolute story for the last 10 years. So that would be the kingdom economy. We've been tested multiple times in this journey. I remember. This is what I wanted to say. Because in an open source software, you can take the entire code base and walk off with it, right? So that's a threat. So we had, I remember a group of good brothers, and they should have known better, but they sat down and they're like, we love what you're building, the quality of what you're building. Would it be okay if we take that and we're going to go sell it and make a big business selling this to churches? And this is a moment where you face, how committed am I to this open source thing? How committed am I to releasing power? And so we did. Multiple times, actually. This test kind of came. But I tell you, this is the nature of the Lord, right? He takes Abraham and he says, take your son up there and sacrifice him. It's a test. Take your world, your future, take your promises, take your everything, right? Sacrifice it. This is like part of the journey in this thing. So it's not 100% easy, but it is a blessing.
We have about 1 minute left. What are some things that you're doing currently in AI? And then what are some ways that people in the room could help you?
Yeah, okay, here's and we got 1 minute.
You maybe have 30 seconds more.
So here's some barriers, and this one's really off book, but this one's on my heart. I was approached by a massive, massive movement, blessed by God, where they, even just last year, 400,000 baptisms. They are hitting a scale of multiplication to where standard training strategies can't work, leadership gatherings, things like this, to where they just financially can't do it. It's moving so fast. People are coming to faith so fast. And they're approaching me asking, could we make an audio coach that would deliver the training content? So in their language, they could speak into this thing. It would speak back to them because most of them are illiterate, so that they could sustain a quality of training across the millions of people in this movement. I think there's more of that out there. I think there's a barrier to the illiterate, or I just don't want to read type of literate people that we're on the edge of getting this kind of tooling out to. Anybody who wants to run after that rabbit trail would be awesome. The other is that they're not on smartphones. And so exploring ways to take a feature phone that can just do messaging through SMS and phone calls to where they could get to an audio agent that would be able to deliver content back to them. This is an interesting, I would love to chase this with anybody who is interested.
Well, thank you guys for the time, and we would love for anyone that's open to join us to come and be a part. So I think we're on a break after this. A break.
I've got like 12 other ideas, so anybody that wants to do that longer will be over here.